And then, of course, offer your opinion. If you don't leave your opinion, how can we argue with you? Feel free to do so, 900CHML.com. Poll question of the day, your thoughts on Karla Homolka living in Quebec with her kids, going to school there, the neighborhood shocked and not too happy. Neither are you. Feel free to offer your opinion on that. A blog and commentary today, no Canadian can expect city services in the middle of nowhere. This is in regard to Attawapiskat. Feel free to offer your opinion there. And, of course, Facebook and Twitter, all kinds of stuff in regard to the news about Karla Homolka living in Canada. I just don't get it. I really, other than to, how can you have any sort of remorse or respect for your victims by coming back, even if you're in another province? Karla Homolka is going to be hounded until the day she dies. People will always know where she is. Why would you come back? You know what? Maybe that's a question we'll ask Gary Dierenfeld before we get into the other issues we're going to talk to him about. Joining us now, Gary Dierenfeld, social worker, yoursocialworker.com. He's with us now. Hi, Gary. How you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, Scott?
Doing quite well. We got a very odd mix of topics here, so I'm going to be very delicate in how I handle it.
Okay.
Obviously, I'll leave it at that. What is your thoughts? I was just talking to Tim Danson last hour, lawyer for the French and Mahaffey families. He was so bold as to say he believes that Karla Homolka is a psychopath. And, he's firmly entrenched in that, his belief, as lots do, that she should be behind bars with her cohort. Why would she come, when you get off of something like this, you serve your time, your 12 years or whatever your plea got you, you're given a new identity, you're given a new lease on life, you're given a second chance in life. Why would you come back to this country?
You know what? Good question. And I don't have the answer to that. I think she has considerable problems, whether or not a psychopath. She was certainly a party to horrendous sexual abuse crimes and murders. And even, with the aspect of coercion, this is a person who is been so traumatized with or without the sociopathic label and her complicity. There's no way of figuring out her thinking. But I have to agree with you. Why would you want to come back and in a sense, put yourself at risk of recognition? It doesn't make sense on face value, but maybe she missed the good old country of Canada.
Over and above, people recognizing her and what she might go through, how do you raise your kids? She's got 3 kids, obviously enrolled in this school in Quebec. Obviously, they're going to find out or going to be exposed to this. I mean, if she had taken them or left them and stayed in another country, there's certainly less of a chance of her kids finding out about this.
Right.
Certainly not being ridiculed. We've got concerns on Facebook that the kids will be bullied. Even for that reason, why would she bring her kids back here?
Yeah, again, you got to wonder if she's capable of empathy, and by that I mean putting herself in the shoes of someone else and acting in the interest of that someone else, because clearly this is a situation that, again, will position her kids to be at risk. From those kids' perspective, though, they will form their opinion of their mother, Karla, less so on the history and more so on their personal experience. So I can only hope that she's at least a barely adequate mother, so that their experiences, these kids' experiences growing up, can be as normalized and reasonable as possible. When they do get older, they are going to have to reconcile her history with their experience of her. And you got to know the likelihood of that creating disturbance for these 3 children is remarkably high.
That was my next question. I mean, what are the chances? Well, let's start with this. What are the chances that she's a good parent?
Well, first of all, coming back to Canada, re-exposing her kids to these kinds of issues, one can already argue that she's not too empathetic.
Mm-hmm.
But having said that, we don't know what her life was on the island where she was living. So we got to be careful not to be judge, jury, and executioner, trying to make armchair diagnoses and suppositions here. So I've almost lost myself in this train of thought.
What if you're the families, the Mahaffey and French family? Obviously, they have to deal with the loss of their daughters. How do they deal with the fact that every so often there's a parole hearing or something that their lawyer has to go back and fight? That's one thing, but to have somebody out and walking the streets, how do they deal with that?
They may not be dealing with that, quite frankly. In every one of these circumstances, they run the risk of feeling re-traumatized, where they have to relive their living hell. And they have a life sentence, along with everyone else. These are horrendous situations that it's like the gift that keeps on giving. It doesn't end. And our heart goes out to them as the victims of these crimes and the survivors of these crimes. We just want to be as supportive as possible of them in their circumstance.
What about the community in Quebec where she now resides? How do they cope? How do you cope if you got a kid in the same school or even if she moved in next door to you?
I know. It's going to create such resentment, such backlash in all likelihood that her time there will likely be limited. There's a great risk it's going to break down. And then, of course, their children are at risk of yet another substantial change in their life. And as children accumulate all these substantial changes, it does put them at risk of their own mental health issues, given all the circumstances involved.
Can this be good, and not like I'm sticking up for her in any way, but can this be good for her stability as a member of society?
You know what? I don't know that we can talk about what's good or not for her, good for her stability. I would have to question that she has any adequate mental health given the history. And at this point, she may be in her own survival mode, taking one day at a time, one foot after the other, just trying to get through life.
Can you see this working in this community in Quebec? Do you think this is the last we've heard of this, or do you think it's just a matter of time before she moves on?
My bet would be that it's a matter of time before she moves on. Her crimes were so horrendous, so shocking, that the likelihood of any community being heartwarming and accepting, supporting, and nurturing, is pretty low. They're likely not going to cut her much slack. She's going to experience the backlash from that, and I think it'll be a rough time for all involved, unfortunately.
What advice would you have for somebody who is in this community and concerned about this? How do they? What advice do you give them to deal with this? Do you just pretend? Is that what you do? Do you just pretend it's not happening?
It's not that you pretend it's not happening, but you do mind your own business. If you don't want to associate with Carla or her children, then don't. Be mindful of your own children. Be mindful of not coloring your children's attitude with your own. And at the end of the day, we not only want our kids to be safe, but we still want them to be courteous, respectful, and kind. So our own children can still be reasonable throughout.
All right, I don't want to go into the topic that we were going to talk about because it's just not fitting considering what we're talking about now. So I'm just going to ask you about your thought on some of the news of today and get your take on it. Earlier on, we were talking to Alex Pearson, who was reporting live from was reporting from the Tim Bosma murder trial. The jury out today because of legal arguments and such. She painted a picture of Dylan Millard and his command he had over his subordinates, for lack of a better word, and that they described this horrific crime as a mission, and it was almost as if they were living in a fantasy land, in TV land, and it's been horrific, of course, for the Bosma family, who must be coming to the realization that Tim Bosma died for no reason other than the thrill of these people. How do you, from what you followed, how do you characterize the relationships that were going on here and just the general lack of respect for life?
Oh my God! So Millard is coming across as poster child for being a heinous psychopath. He and Bernardo, we were just talking about that. Mm-hmm. They are cut from the same cloth. There is no sense of the well-being of others. People are there as objects to serve me for whatever gratification. In Bernardo, it was sexual. In in Millard's case, the self-gratification of lording power and control over others and getting whatever I want by my nefarious means and controlling my subordinates. So we're talking in both cases about some of society's most heinous psychopaths. And that's what we've got here. He
seems to have a very different dimension to himself on the stand. Smitch seems to be scared stiff. He's fully cognizant, it appears, of what's going on. Dylan Millard seems more jovial. How would you describe
Dylan Millard is so narcissistic, he thinks he knows better than everyone. So whatever else is going on around him, I'm smart, I'm wiser than you, I'm the cat's pajamas, whereas with Smith, he's an idiot. And he realizes to some degree, oh my God, I have been sucked into the vortex of this narcissistic psychopath, and I'm in over my head, and it's going to get chopped off. So they have very different personality dispositions. So the former is the puppeteer, and the other is the puppet.
How do you explain the loyalty? The police asked some of the others, you knew something wasn't right. Why didn't you call the cops? They were more interested in their loyalty to Dylan Millard than they were to the life of Tim Bosma. How do you explain that?
In part fear and in part charisma. But you have to appreciate that those folks that Millard would have under his spell, in all likelihood, they had a number of issues, personality and personal issues themselves that would have created some degree of vulnerability. So if we scratch the surface and look at their upbringing, odds are we would find the root cause of their own vulnerability, making them susceptible to a puppeteer and charismatic narcissistic leader like Millard.
Gary Dierenfeld has been with us, yoursocialworker.com. That's yoursocialworker.com. Gary, as always, thanks for the time. Much appreciated.
My pleasure. My God, I know. What a horrendous conversation this has been.
I know. I hear you.
I want to feel my love for you.
Thank you for helping